Are we good to go?
Yeah.
All right, so hello, my name is Eliot Bemis, and I'm going to be talking about maker culture today. So personally, I just love to build things, you know. From when I was a child, when I was growing up, I just loved to build things, you know. When you're young, your parents always encourage you to, you know, build and invent and just create. And one great example of this is Legos, you know. I can't think of one product today that I would buy that would be incomplete. But Legos, you're buying the set to build it. You don't go out and buy, you know, a cell phone to solder all the pieces together so you can call your friends. And I think it's kind of like this lost art that we need to get back into, you know. Builders and the people who do DIY are just, you know, the area is just growing and it's really great. So, I mean, if any of you have children, I'm not sure if you tell them to use Legos, but you definitely should. So from there was actually this TED Talk by Thomas Twaits, who he tried to build his own toaster. So he reverse engineered a toaster that he went to Walmart and he bought like a $5 toaster, and he was like, oh, this can't be too complicated, you know, there might be like 30 or 40 pieces, it can't be too hard. So he ended up taking it apart, and there were like 400 different pieces in it, you know. It had like steel, copper, plastic, nickel. It was ridiculous. And he was like, you know, there's this gap between what we can literally build and what we know how to build, you know. You may think, you know, oh, I understand this iPad, I can, you know, use it and function with it, but in reality you know how like the internal parts work of it. So there's kind of this gap between, you know, the technology and what we can literally build. So this is a great example because if any of you guys have read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it kind of encompasses this whole idea of if somebody from the 21st century went back in time where it was, you know, more primitive, not as much technology, you think that they would be able to, you know, kind of become this emperor and, you know, conquer the people by having this upper hand on technology and understanding everything. But, you know, as you can see, if somebody was to go back, what could I actually build? You know, what could I offer with the skills that I own? So this is what, you know, the whole builder and DIY kind of thing, you know, it's important to us. So I love this quote: left to his own devices, he couldn't build a toaster. He could just about make a sandwich, and that was it. I think that's, you know, very funny and clever, and it's just a great thing. So over the time of my SYP, me and one of my friends, Michael Thorpe, who was also doing it, we took a class of blacksmithing, and, you know, it was a really cool experience because, you know, I got to learn a bunch of new materials, and I actually treated it more as it was like a literal class, like a school course. Being a green engineer for 3 years now, I've kind of, you know, been exposed to this sort of idea of where you come in and you're kind of just thrown into the equation. You know, you don't have time, you can't sit back in a classroom and kind of like shy away. We got in there, he talked for 30 minutes, and he threw us, you know, literally into the fire, you know, with the forge. We were hammering it away, and at first it was kind of scary, you know. Just kind of not having a chance to, you know, like study or be prepared, you know. He was just like, go, you know, don't hurt yourself, you know. I mean, we had safety equipment obviously, but it was a really cool experience. So that's me making an S-hook. And so he had a great quote where he said, you might be a blacksmith if you make a tool, and then use that tool to make a tool, and then that tool to make a tool. And for my SYP project, I built a tool, a very important tool. I am currently in the stages of building a bike frame out of bamboo. And so, you know, the bike is a very great machine. You know, it's a medium for transportation, but also the way that we interact with the world and the people around it. You know, one great example, if you compare it to, is, I mean, oh, sorry, I'm going out of place this way, but the car. The car in itself, the design, hasn't changed for 100 years. It's all about transportation. And that's all. It may upgrade, you know, we may have, you know, it may have air conditioning now and radio and all that stuff, but think about how we've changed the world around the car. You know, highways, our streets in our cities, you know, it's become a very narrow pathway for the car alone. And I think that doesn't do justice for anybody. You know, it's very unsafe and unfriendly for people. So in my paper, I wrote about, you know, alternative infrastructure that we could possibly have in Newton, because last year we had our first master bike plan installed in Newton, and right now we only have 3 miles of bike lanes in Newton. And in my paper I compared it to Portland, Oregon, which right now has over 600 miles of biking infrastructure, you know, lanes, bridges, you know, you name it, they have it. And it's really, you know, kind of sad to think, you know, Newton, we're such an innovative city, you know, we focus on education and all these green alternatives, but, you know, where's the bike? You know, it's important to what we do. And personally, I love biking, you know. I ride my bike to school. I rode it here in this dress, you know. It's just what I do. So this quote from Marshall McLuhan and in his book, Understanding Media, which was wrote in 1964, he wrote, "We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us." You know, the car. It correlates perfectly with that. And so, along these lines, you know, with the building of the bike, I went up to my Uncle George's house, who lives in Derry, New Hampshire, and that's where the bike frame is currently right now. I wish I could have it to show it with you, or show it to you guys, but, you know, all of these things that I'm doing kind of encompass this like hacker space, you know, these areas where people come together to build and create, much like the Green Engineering Shop. If you haven't been down there yet, I highly encourage you to go down there, check it out. It's really awesome. But more or less, it's an area where people can just come together and think and create and, you know, just build. You know, we love to build. Who doesn't love to, you know, just get gritty? You know, I'm so sick of being in a classroom where I have to write a paper where I could just, you know, build something. I could show you that I understand your concepts. I understand, you know, the biology by something, but why do I have to write you a paper? There are all these alternatives that we aren't exploiting, and it's frustrating personally because, you know, it's just my teaching. It's the way I love to learn, you know. So I wish that we could kind of get back into this, you know, primitive way of just building and just, you know, having fun with it. You know, where's the fun in education anymore? So it was a really cool experience to actually build my bike, and, you know, as soon as it's done, I'll be riding it around Newton. So if you see me, you know, give me a honk. But yeah, so from there, I'd like to leave you with a quote. "At times of change, the learners are the ones who will inherit the world, while the knowers will be beautifully prepared for a world which no longer exists." We need to be ready for change and, you know, start expanding the way we think. And, you know, it's great to know the past, but we need to start moving ahead and jumping forward. So from there, I'd like to actually ask you guys a question of, do any of you guys actually personally bike? Recreation. Somewhat, I'm gonna call you out and say it can't be such a yes, no. It's almost like a commitment. Like in 2004, PBOT, which is Portland's Bureau of Transportation, a lot like MassDOT, so in 2004 they only had 4% of their people living in the city of Portland commuting to work and, you know, just transportation, and now it's up to around 10%, which may not seem like too much, but it's actually really, really good compared to most other cities. I mean, I'm sure Newton must be around 2% because, you know, I don't see many bikers. I mean, that's also just because Newton is a very, you know, tight, you know, our roads are tight, you know, it's very hard to fit in. But, you know, in my paper I wrote actually about these alternative infrastructures that might not be as linear as a bike lane, like having I mean, ideally we would be on a gridded city, which would make it better, but instead of having our streets just be flat, having them being on a slight tilt, so you have one of the streets going positively and the other negatively. You'd be able to use your energy, just because of the way, you know, gravity works, to, you know, have it be more beneficial to what you're actually doing. And then also having a bike lane that would be wired with LED lights that are powered by piezoelectronic plates, so, you know, you're not using any of the electricity that you would be using for, you know, street lighting would all be created by the cyclist who would be on the street. Also improving upon safety, because, you know, that's when most accidents happen, are during the night. So I mean, SYP was a great experience, and I really enjoyed doing it. It was a lot of fun. I mean, I learned a lot. It's very independent in the sense of, you know, nobody's hacking away at you saying, you know, you got to get it done, you got to get it done. It's very self-motivated and self-driven, and so I really enjoyed it. So thank you. If you guys have any questions, feel free to.
So what were you just talking about? I think you said piezo plates. Is that they're plates to harness the biker's energy?
They're like these ceramic plates that have crystals inside them, and once they're compressed, they like create energy. They are like...
They're in the ground?
Yeah, they would be like installed in the ground, and they're like way ahead of their time, kind of, and people are just kind of starting to use them. Like, we've experimented a little with green engineering, but, you know, a lot of my ideas in my paper were more like concepts than actual, like, I didn't physically like use a piezoelectronic plate to make a bike lane or anything. It was just very much alternative infrastructures. So.
But they're not being used
currently? No, nowhere. So it was just a cool idea that I thought would be fun. So, yeah.
You had talked about the space that you've been using in terms of your education space as a hacker space.
Yes.
Can you go into that term a little bit more?
All right. Well, MIT actually has one of these hacker spaces. That's kind of like the slang for it. And it's not like a place where, you know, all the computer geeks bring their computers and their punks and they're like, I'm going to hack this guy, you know. It's just a place where, you know, there would be Legos, there would be Kinects, there would be, you know, electronics for people, you know, just to kind of like hack their you know, whatever they want to hack. You know, I'm not sure if you've heard of Arduino, but it's kind of this multi-platformed, you know, electronic base that allows users to like personally customize their, you know, electronics. So you could hook up, you know, your coffee machine to your garage door. So, you know, once you go and put on your coffee and you're doing that, you know, your garage door opens and your car turns on if you have a, you know, a push to start car or whatever. It's kind of, so the hacker spaces are a lot for just an area for people to go to build, but also a place for like ideas to come and collaborate. So, you know, you have people who are in the field of electronics and, you know, just, you know, 3D modeling, you know, just coming together. So if, you know, I'd need help, you know, building my bike, I could go there and, you know, have them help.
Yeah, the term hacker has a subversive connotation.
Oh, it's so skewed to what it actually...
No, but I mean, I don't mean it in a bad way. Subversive in a bad way. I'm trying to see if this kind of way of looking at education is subversive, if you think it's subversive, and in how ways is that positive, and how ways is that not so positive?
For education?
Sure, if you don't mind.
So more or less, what do I like about education? What do I not like about education?
No, I guess the question would be more like this. If we're going to call something a hackerspace, I kind of hear that as, I don't hear that as necessarily negative, but I do hear the idea that this is kind of subversive things that not the whole kind of system wants going on.
Yes, yes.
So that's the thing. How is that educationally subversive, what you're doing?
I mean, that's very difficult to answer. I mean...
It might be an unfair question.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the closest thing that education does have to kind of a hacker space would be like green engineering, and now that we have the innovation lab class is a lot like it. I guess it doesn't fit a lot of the models of, you know, a normal history and math class. I mean, of course, you could use math and, you know, history as like tools, but, you know, I don't think that you would have it necessarily be like the core of all education. I do believe it has a place, but, you know, it's not like I'm saying, you know, tear down the system, you know. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you kind of threw an estimate out of biking in Newton at 2%, but does Newton have any way of counting biking?
Not really. I mean, I could have surveyed, you know, every door to door, but there was no, for Newton, there's nobody surveying it or, you know, doing an actual test. So that was just a personal guess. Yes.
I got actually about that. You said that it might be better that Newton would be more bike friendly if there were more of a grid.
Yeah.
Can you explain? Like I've
As in,
someone who is, I guess a half-step biker, one of the things that I kind of wonder, like, why would that be so much more bike-friendly than just roads?
well, like the city of New York, I mean, as a grid, I'm like talking about like a city grid, as in like New York City or something. I mean, kind of, it's almost bad the way that I think about it as a grid, because if you look at New York City, I mean, I'm sure all of you have been there, it's so congested. I mean, cars everywhere. But as a standpoint from a biker, that's like the nicest thing in the world, because all those cars are just like dying there on a red light, and you kind of just get to like sneak by. You can kind of weave in between those lanes, and I guess it is kind of selfish of me to be like, oh, it'd be cool to have a grid. But then also, if like we were on this grid, it makes everything much cleaner when it comes to the actual like building of the infrastructure, because if you were to like maintenance and actually build it in factories, you wouldn't have to like customly build your bridges for every street like you do here if you wanted to, where you could just have it kind of be an assembly line-esque if you were to build infrastructure in New York or any other gridded city. So.
One more question.
Yes?
How did you, from the experience of doing some of your project, how did you grow or get stretched?
I mean, I grew right from the start. I mean, I think I changed my project like 4 or 5 times. Like at first I was gonna like build a bomb shelter or something stupid like that, something like scaled way out of proportion. And I kind of realized, going through this process, that it takes a lot more work and, involvement in actually like being a part of your project. It can't just be kind of like this side thing in your life that you're like, I'm gonna kind of half-ass it like I do with any other school work. It's very much, I have to submerge myself in this project and learn about it. And as an experience, I mean, I think if I now was said to go do any other project, I'd blow it out of the water. And I mean, I wish I could do this again, knowing what I know now with the experience I had building and learning and writing. So I mean, overall it was just a great experience. I mean, so
What are you doing next year?
going to Parsons School of Design in New York City. So
Get to fight the grid.
yeah, I'm actually in this new program called Urban Design, and it's like 3 years old now, and it's like I kind of call myself like a civil designer, where we do like engineering and design together, like collaborating, looking at the city of New York and how people interact with it and try to find ways to make it better, a lot like my SYP. So I mean, I'm super excited for it, so it'll be awesome. I will.
Thank you, Eliot.
Thank you.
One more question, please.
Yeah, I just was wondering how far along your bamboo bike is.
Oh, right now I wish I could have it here. It's actually up in Derry, New Hampshire with my Uncle George, but I have it as like a dry fit right now, so it's not completely bamboo. That's just for the poles, but the lugs, which are, so bamboo is like, it's hollow.
Right.
So the metal lugs will be like a male insert into it, and then I'm using a hemp that'll be dipping in epoxy to like wrap it up as like a twine to secure it. And so as soon as it's done, I'll be posting it on my wiki, so if you stay and check with that, you can check it out. I'll probably post some videos of me riding it. I'm so frustrated that I couldn't have it here to show you guys, because I know that's like a huge part of it, being like, oh, look at my tangible product. So I'm sorry about that.
Be looking for you on the street.
All right. I'm sure you'll see me.
Thank you, Eliot.
Yep.